Good evening. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Wednesday Night Live. Today, what is live as well will be archived. So, it's both live and perpetual. Let's put it that way. How's that? Good. So, this weekend. Well, actually, I should begin with the timely thing, which is tonight. Tonight is actually a special happy birthday and a happy yahrzeit, you can say. It's the same individual. Some of you may know him. His name is Moses. Moshe Rabbeinu. So he was born and passed away on the same day, the 7th of Adar, which is tonight, tomorrow. You've heard of this man? Yes. So though none of us have met him physically, I guess, but he lives on. Until this day, we call him Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher. Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher. And though we're talking now over 3,300 years ago, he's probably the most famous person in history, and definitely set into motion events that would impact the universe and civilization in so many different ways. First of all, on a simple level, as an author, this is a feat that no one will ever match, and that is the greatest bestseller, remains tops the charts, that it's not even on the bestseller list, is the Bible. It sells more books every year, even today in 2012, than any other book, and accumulatively for sure, and more languages translated than any other book. And you could see it. You go on the subways, people reading little Bibles. It's just still part of existence, even though to the chagrin maybe of some of the Enlightenment 200 years ago, they thought by now there'd be no Bibles left. And the chagrin of many people who burn Bibles, it still remains the number one book. Mysteriously for many, they have no clue why. Some people consider it primitive and so on. But however you twist and turn it, it still captures the imagination. And who is the Torah associated with? Of course, God. But after God, Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Kibul Torah Sinai. Moses received the Torah at Sinai, became the first communicator and the first prophet of all that communicated this Torah. And as a matter of fact, the Torah is sometimes even called Torah's Moshe, which is a strange statement. Torah's Hashem. Could you call it the Torah of Moses, the Torah of God? Moses was just a conduit, was just a messenger. So the Medrash says, the interesting thing is, we say, Zichru Torah's Moshe Avdi. God says that Zichru will remember the Torah of Moshe because he gave his life for it. And someone who gives a life for something is considered as if he is the author of it. So essentially, the interesting irony here is because Moses was humble and completely dedicated his life to it, therefore you can call it in his name because he wasn't an individual of his own, he gave his life to God. And that's the reason that you could be associated with him. Had he been a big PR man or someone that is into his own name, they would never call the Torah with his name. It was because his name is so close and associated with God's name, because he dedicated his life entirely to God, to that extent. And there's actually an interesting law in the Torah. It says, we have to honor people who have taught us something. It says that even if you learn one word from somebody, you're supposed to honor them. That's why one of the customs is we stand up before a scholar or someone who's our teacher. You're not honoring the human being, you're honoring the wisdom, which is God's wisdom, that this person carries and conveyed to you. So it's like you're honoring and respecting something that is greater than yourself. But we don't worship human beings. There's an interesting distinction. It says that a king and a scholar both have to be honored for whatever the reason, each one for their own reason. A king, it says, if he forgoes and says, you don't have to honor me, you still have to give him honor. In other words, he cannot be moichel, he cannot forgo his own honor. If a Talmud Chacham, a scholar, says, that's all right, you don't have to honor me, you have to listen to him, and you don't have to give him that honor. In other words, if he says, please don't rise, you don't have to do so. For a king, even if he insists not that you don't honor him, you still have to do so. And the reason for this, interestingly, is because a king's honor is God's honor, and the king has no control over it. A wise person's honor, on the other hand, is also God's honor, but because it became his wisdom, so he owns it, in a sense that he can also forego and say he's become one with the wisdom. And therefore, for example, there's a concept where we have to teach. When we teach something, we should always say the name of the person we heard it. It says, "Emer dover b'shem emrei." Someone says something, the name of someone, you bring redemption to the world. As Esther, when she spoke to Achashverosh, she spoke in the name of Mordechai. Yet we find many times that great scholars and sages didn't repeat things in the names of their teacher. And the reason is because once you own it, it becomes so much integrated in you that in a sense you control its power in a good way. So anyway, all this elaboration is about Moses, his birthday, and Yortzeit on the same day. Haman, who later, the arch enemy of the Jewish people, made the mistake because when he threw lots and looking for the day to annihilate the Jews, the lots, he chose 7th of Adar because he said it's a good day for him because it's the day when Moses passed away. So he saw that as a bad omen for the Jews and a good day to kill them. And the Talmud says, but he didn't know it was also his birthday. And so if he had known it's his birthday, then you realize, besides the fact that a Yortzeit, even though it's sad at the time, but a Yortzeit also has, over the years, it's a day that we honor as a day when the soul goes on. It's a continuing journey. Once the pain is gone, the Moshe Rabbeinu, as I said, continues to live. So we dedicate this class and all classes to the great Moses, whose, as I said, his birthday and Yortzeit is the same day. And since I mentioned the word Zichru Torah, to remember, the theme of tonight's discussion is about memory. And that is for many reasons, but primarily because this weekend, the Shabbos before Purim, there's always an additional Torah portion read. Every Shabbat, there's 52 weeks in the year, corresponding 52 chapters in the Torah. So every Shabbat, every week has its corresponding chapter. Every chapter has 7 sections, corresponding to 7 days of the week of each of the 52 weeks. In effect, every day of the year has its respective Torah portion. But there are certain weeks where we read an additional Torah portion. We take out a second Torah scroll. And one of those weeks is this weekend. And we read the chapter called Zachor, to remember. Parshat Zachor. And therefore the Shabbos is called Shabbat Zachor, the Shabbos of memory. Now what memory is it referring to? It's actually referring to a memory of the arch enemy of the Jewish people, Amalek, that the Torah talks about. And when the Jews were fragile and vulnerable right after they left Egypt, no one had the nerve to attack them except Amalek did. And he became this sworn enemy, like the Nazis of the time, of biblical times. So finally, the Torah says, you shall remember what Amalek did to you, forever and ever. And the Shabbos before Purim, because Haman actually was a descendant from Amalek, so it says before we actually honor it on Purim, the Shabbos before, we remember that which we will honor the Purim, which is next Thursday. So this is the technical reason for reading it. I've discussed this idea many times about why we remember what Amalek is. Briefly, I won't go over this. This is recorded, and you can always access it in the archives, the video archives, and I've written about it. Amalek is, in psychological terms, why he's such an arch enemy is because Amalek is the same numerical value, the gematria. In Hebrew letters, every letter has numerical value. Aleph is 1, a Beis is 2, a Gimel is 3. So any Hebrew name, every Hebrew word has a number associated with it. Let's just take an example. Give me your Hebrew name. What's your Hebrew name?
Hirsch.
Huh? Hirsch. So Hirsch is a Hey is 5, Yud is 10, Reish is 200, so that's 215, and a Shin is 300, so that's 515. So that numerical value has corresponding names and words that are associated with it. It's one of the ways deeper ways of analyzing and interpreting Torah ideas on a general life. So that number 515 has some connection with you and your soul. Is the only one name you have? Hirsch? Tzvi Hirsch, perhaps? Hirschber. Okay. So the name Amalek also has that, and Amalek is the same gematria as the word Suffolk, which in Hebrew is doubt. So Suffolk is 60, and 40, and 80 is 140, and 100 is 240. So Amalek is 240. And what is Suffolk? Why is that Amalek Suffolk? Because Amalek represents the doubts that each of us are plagued with. So you may think, doubt? What's that? Such an arch enemy? You think an enemy is someone who wants to kill you, someone who wants to attack you. Hatred, anger. We have many vices many forces in the world that are very destructive and dangerous. Doubt sounds so innocuous. It's not so good to have doubts, but if you think about it, doubt is a silent killer. Its power is not in the fact that it's so aggressive and so violent. Its power lies in the fact that it's so silent. When you're paralyzed by doubt, it can forever hold you back from doing anything in life. How many of us don't make a move because we have a doubt? And that's why there's an expression, Ein simcha ka'ataras hasfeikas. There's no joy like the joy of resolving doubts. So even making sometimes a wrong move may be better than being paralyzed and making no move. As they say, they say the greatest risk of all is taking no risk. Life makes choices. And that paralysis, precisely because it doesn't seem so aggressive or loud, can be quite significant. Now, of course, there are times that find the status quo. You're buying time, you're saving time. But if it ultimately is a force that paralyzes you, it takes its toll over the years, over the days, over the years that you do not make a move. Then it becomes increasingly difficult to make a move. And that's what Amalek did. When the Jews left Egypt, and they were passionate and excited, they had just seen God's hand. And they had, after so much suffering, so when you see salvation after suffering, it's a very high moment. And Amalek threw doubt into them. And the expression used, which we read on Shabbos, in this reading, it says, remember what Amalek did to you on the way out of Egypt. Asher karcha baderech. So the word karcha means, literally, he encountered you in the way. In other words, he went to war with you. Let's see how they translate it. How they surprised you on the road and cut off all the weak people at your rear when you were parched and weary, and they did not fear God. In other words, they took advantage of you. That's the technical interpretation. That they surprised you or they attacked you by surprise. And especially they preyed on the weak people who... But karcha also has another word in Hebrew which means coldness, numbness. When you're excited about something, you're anticipating, you're driven, and then the worst thing someone can do is just throw cold water on you and just say, don't be so excited. Don't think you can really change. Don't think there's any hope. That has more power than someone who is aggressively attacking you, because they kill you with the apathy. They kill you with indifference, which in some ways is more powerful than actually, at least someone's fighting with you. They say, what's worse, apathy or ignorance? And the guy says, I don't care, and I don't know, and I don't care. The I don't care, the apathy, in many ways is more destructive. And someone, at least you share with them an exciting idea, and they argue with you. Okay, there's a sign of life. But if they fall asleep on you and they yawn when you're about to share with them an earth-shattering experience, that is very, very damaging. Unless you fight it, of course. And that's what Amalek did. It's that type of throwing cold water, creating doubts, creating that type of paralysis. You're not so sure, and so on. And especially in times of when there's a need for a move, like if you're in the middle of a war, doubts and confusion and being paralyzed is equal to death. You have to make a move. You need a leader. You need someone that's going to make a move quickly and think clearly, and so on. So on this Shabbos we remember this, and it's connected to Purim. But the truth is that, as I said, I've discussed this theme many times, but the word Zachor is the key word here. Memory, to remember. I thought of discussing this power of memory. On Shabbos we don't even say Zachor Amalek, we say to remember. And of course Zachor is a central theme in Judaism. We have Yizkor. For those of us who lost parents, parents passed away, so on Yom Kippur and other several times a year, we say Yizkor. Yizkor means to remember. So memory is a very powerful force in the human being. And I've discussed this as well, I believe, last year and previous years, different themes. I wanted to address something which I don't believe we've discussed, at least not elaborated upon. So as I said, I've discussed the idea of memory, why it's so powerful. It connects us to generations past. The enemies of the Jews always attacked. The first thing they always attacked when they came to a city was the tombstones of all things. Strange that they would attack cemeteries. Why is a cemetery a threat to them? There's no one there that can do anything to them. Because they sensed unconsciously or subconsciously that the power of Jews is their connection to the past. And in a sense, you destroy the tombstones. You destroy the link, in their mind at least. and they were correct about that. That's why we consider a place where we rest those bodies of souls that have departed as a holy, sacred ground. We consider we visit. We're not visiting the dead. We're visiting the spirit, which has been put to rest there. When we signed the Ma'aras HaMachpelah in Hebron, till this day they fight over the place where the patriarchs rested. One of the most powerful stories early in the Bible is when Abraham buys a plot for Sarah, which becomes Hebron, the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. So the power of memory is clear in the context, the cultural context, the historical context, and the religious context. But I wanted to discuss it more on a personal level. This issue called memory, how it works, because I think through looking at our own memories or a lack of memory or forgetfulness, it can shed light on in general us as human beings in general, and how we're shaped and how we work and how we function. And surprisingly, I think you could see when you look at memory as also a tool that is a critical component in relationships, in communication, and so on. And I'll make the case for it. So that's what I'm going to be discussing now. I can use myself as a personal specimen here, a kosher guinea pig, if you wish, because I would say maybe my high point in life is definitely being with you. But another high point was over the years. As some of you may know, I was what's called a chayzer and a maniach. These are Hebrew words in Hasidic lexicon that refer to someone who repeated. Chayzer means repeated. When the Rebbe would speak, the Pavitcher Rebbe spoke. So I was, for many years, one of the main writers and main people who reviewed and reconstructed what he said. Now this was not small feat because it was a Shabbos and holidays, many of these talks. And on Shabbos and holidays, no tape recorders were used and no notes were taken. So then how exactly did it get published? You may wonder. Well, it wasn't a magic. It was simply a few people, myself included. As I said, I was a primary person in this team. That we remembered hours of these talks, and then with our good old brains, then after Shabbos, we put it down on paper, committed to paper, and then had it published. I had the honor to do this from the years 1979 through 1992, when the Rebbe suffered a stroke and was unable to speak after that. So I published probably over 1,000 of his talks. Many of them, as I said, were delivered on Shabbos and holidays. And people always wonder and ask me, how did you do that? So I'm here to share some memory tips tonight. So I will talk, and I can speak from personal experience. It's absolutely definitely a unique element, because who does such a thing today? Why would anyone need to do it? With modern technology, we record things, we take notes, and there's no necessity to just memorize. Even though, frankly, if I had it my way and I was involved in the education process, based on my experience, what I've learned through doing this, I would make it absolutely incumbent on every student, every one of us, to memorize, because it actually changes the way you think and changes who you are as a human being. And in many ways, I can't even know how I would be had I not done this. So, interestingly, the Shabbos rules of not taking notes and tape recorder compelled us to use our minds in ways that we would never have used had we relied on technology. And trust me, the talks that were delivered in the weekday, which I recorded on tape, I don't remember, and because I relied on the machine. And here we had to rely on this machine here. So I have a few key. I have some experience and insights that I could share with you, and I have the credibility because I've done it. So Zachor to me is personally close to my heart. It's not necessarily about Amalek. I happen to remember good things, not just about Amalek. But as you'll see, memory is a powerful, powerful force. And of course, on a very basic level, we all ask this question. And there's some best-selling books or there's seminars and talks, and it always attracts someone's attention when you get in your inbox, tricks, tips from memory tips to remember names, remember experiences, and so on. So it's interesting. What exactly is memory, and why does it fade? And why are there things? I can turn around this room here. Guarantee that every one of you has at least one, if not many more, memories that will never die. Things that you remember just as if they happened today. I mean, you're not always conscious of it, but it's very easy to retrieve. And then there are things that seemingly are important that you simply can't recall. Things you've heard, things you experienced, and so on. But there are things that all of us have that are always part of you. And sometimes they're so part of you that it's inseparable. You can't even erase it from your memory if you wanted to. Unfortunately, sometimes they're not such good memories. They can be haunting ones. So the question is, why some things remain etched in our psyches and some things are not? So the obvious answer that any intelligent person would say, that if it's a memory of something that happened earlier in your life, your formative years, or a very traumatic experience, a very powerful experience, those things don't go away so quickly. But the question is why? Okay, so the obvious reason again would be because it was so significant, it like etched itself inside of you, and it's not just something that would not really become integrated. So you may, yesterday or tonight or last week, you may have heard a very powerful speech. You may have read something. You may have experienced something that you wanted to retain, and then you can't really recall it a week later. The reason is not because it wasn't important, but it didn't have that integrative element that a very traumatic or very powerful or very young experience has. That would be the basic reason that most of us would say why certain things we retain and certain things we don't retain. But the question is this: is there something we can do to turn that switch on? Is there some ingredient that we can do to actually initiate or retrieve certain memories that we want to retrieve and actually lock away or maybe erase and delete some memories we don't want to remember? Now, that would be pretty neat, because unfortunately, often when we're in a crisis or we're in a situation where talk about paralysis and doubts, suddenly you're in a place and all the memories of all your failures or all possible failures come into being, and you wish at that time that you didn't remember everything, because then you'd be able to perhaps move forward. So memory, as you see, talks a lot more than just about remembering names or phone numbers and stuff like that. It has much more broader context. And I'd like to talk about that in more depth and so on. And go away with actual tips and exercises that each of us can do. And I believe that if we think about this, it will illuminate a part of your life in a way you probably never looked at quite this way. And that let's put it perhaps in this context, in the context of something we would not usually associate with memory. Let's associate with another question. Not just how good is your memory. Let me ask you a different question. How good of a listener are you? And we don't have to raise our hands. Usually when I ask this question, around half the room says they're good listeners, half not. That's usually and then at the end of the evening, nobody raises their hands. It depends how you define what a listener is. Some people think they're great listeners, and they're terrible listeners. One thing you can know for sure, it's very hard to be your own judge, obviously. It's because it's not you can determine if you're a good listener, it's the one that's speaking to you that can determine. So if you're going to say, listen, to everyone that speaks to you, I'm a good listener, and everyone that speaks to you says you're not, you can rest assured that they're correct, because they're the ones that are doing the speaking. So listening is about really listening to something and listening to someone. So that's number one. So the fact that you say you're a good listener or you think you're a good listener doesn't necessarily mean. And I'm not trying to be harsh or negative. It's just being honest. To be honest. So what is the definition of really listening? And as you'll see, listening and memory go hand in hand. They're almost the same thing, actually. So a few more questions before I get into the nitty-gritty of the topic about this thing called memory. Who remembers things best as a group? Children remember things best as a group. Now, which is odd as well. Why is that odd? Because memory is definitely a faculty of the intellect. Children clearly have less developed intellect than adults do. We see this in many ways. Adults can concentrate more, adults can abstract, children can be more emotional and not really be able to just separate themselves from the experience, etc., etc. And yet, the things that happen to us in our childhood, stories or songs, things we learn, remain there forever. Simple example. Try teaching a 20-year-old ABC. Almost impossible. Most of us have learned ABC when we were far younger, so we can't really test it. Why is it almost impossible? Because ABC is so meaningless that a 20-year-old will question, why am I learning this? And they won't have patience for it. A child, a child is told, okay, let's learn A, and it becomes almost like a game. A, B, C, D. At the time, the child doesn't even know why it's learning ABC. The teacher knows, supposed to know. And that's because you learn letters. Letters turn into words. Words turn into phrases, sentences, paragraphs. Paragraphs turn into chapters. And that's how ideas are communicated. Without the ABCs, you wouldn't be able to get there. So we start teaching that to an adult, it's extremely difficult. I'm not talking about teaching a new language. New language, sometimes you find that some people pick them up quickly, but even a new language, frankly. Why is it, for example, any language that you pick up after you're 13, 14, you'll have an accent? And a little right before that you don't. Because there's something where it's still, just like a child's bones are more resilient and more flexible, their psyche is also more resilient and more flexible, so they can easily adjust, and they learn things, they adapt them, they absorb them. So the key point here is that a child absorbs like a dry sponge, precisely because it's a clean slate, a tabula rasa, a clean slate. The child does not yet have ideas developed. That's why you can retain so well. So basically, as the hard drive gets filled up, it gets harder to retain well, because you have now context, and context, in a bizarre way, is what actually disturbs the memory process. I'm going to elaborate some more on this in a few minutes. So when you look at children, because they have yet to develop ideas, and they're also even their physical brains have not yet developed consciously ideas and a method of thinking, that's why they're easily able to absorb like a dry sponge. We're no longer dry sponges as adults. Our sponge is wet, saturated. We have some room on our hard drive, but when we hear an idea, we'll usually adapt it to ideas that we have already heard. It'll become part of our picture that we have. So we have a picture. Now I've heard another detail, and you fill in that picture. We rarely are able to challenge our entire picture. First of all, we're not willing to do so. And secondly, we say to ourselves, why should I challenge? I worked hard at developing this outlook of life. Just because I heard a new idea, suddenly do I have to, every time, question my entire outlook? Children don't have all that, so they retain much better. I discovered this, as I said, in my own work. Because when we listen, I came to discover that we have two wheels inside our brain. One we'll call the processor, and one we'll call the absorber. Okay? The absorber listens. The processor processes. So what are you doing right now when you're listening to me? I can't tell you the exact percentage, but I would say it's around 50% absorbing and 50% processing. Probably more processing even than that. Probably 60-70% processing. So we adults, when we hear someone speak, we say to ourselves, I like this, I don't like this, I can make money with this, I can't make money with this. It fits into, that I is processing. As soon as you say I like this, I don't like this. What do you mean you like and don't like this? Person is speaking, what does that have to do with you? Because processing is applying it to yourself. So you say, well, what other way is there to listen? Well, real listening has no processing. It has nothing to do with you. It's hearing the idea for what it is. You say, I'll give you two examples. For example, when you anyone, no one should ever be in a situation like this, but you're standing in front of a court, and there's a jury and a judge. You don't want them processing based on the very convincing witness. You want them listening to everything, to all the evidence. And after hearing it all, then begin the processing. Imagine a great witness is up there, very persuasive, and the judge or the jury come to the decision, you know what? That's how it is. And the rest of the case is like almost insignificant. It's not exactly what you'd appreciate, unless obviously you win. But I'm talking about, an honest proceeding. And another example is research. When you're researching a subject, would you ever come to a conclusion before you finished your research? It's ludicrous. First you gather all the information, and then you collect it all. And you start organizing it, and you start seeing, okay, what emerges from all this information. Until the last piece of information, if you're a thorough and honest researcher, or you want to convey the idea, you want to see every piece of information and detail and evidence, because you may miss something that will significantly change the whole picture. So what you're doing when you're researching, or what a jury or a judge are doing when they're listening, is only absorbing. They're not processing. Now, of course, there's always a little bit of processing even when you absorb, but you do not apply it yet to your whole way of looking at things. When I listened and had to remember, Memory was in direct proportion to how much I absorbed as opposed to how much I processed. If I began focusing on understanding what I was hearing, so counterintuitively, the more I understood, the worse it was for memory. And there's an expression in the Talmud that says, I did the Torah lemivla lepolit. While you're busy absorbing, you can't be busy transmitting. And I did the Torah lepolit. When you're busy transmitting, you can't be busy absorbing. Basically, two people can't be speaking at the same time. You're speaking and I'm listening, and then I'm speaking and you're listening. Now, how many conversations do you know that really work that way? You know the classic joke where the woman says, when we dated, he did all the speaking and I did the listening. The first 10 years of our marriage, I did the speaking and he did the listening. Now we both do the speaking and the neighbors do the listening. So listening is not just the power to hear things. And you often hear this in marital therapy sessions. You're not listening to me. It's usually the woman accuses the man of this more often than the other way around. You're not listening to me. And he says, honey, I heard every word you said. And he repeats it actually. She says, no, I know you hear what I'm saying. You're not listening to what I'm saying. What's the difference between hearing and listening? Healthy ears hear. A tape recorder also hears. Listening is more than just hearing. Listening means that you're respecting the sacred space of another person. And you're putting yourself aside, and you really want to know and hear what that person has to say. Listen to what that person has to say. Even if you don't like it, even if it disagrees with you, even if you're smarter and you think it should be differently. And that is not something that most of us have mastered, that art. Because that art requires effort. How often is it you're in a conversation and the other person is speaking, okay, let's turn it the other way around. You're speaking, and the other person is giving you advice before you even finished your sentence. And they're telling you what you should have said, what you could have said. They're responding to what they think you should be saying. Actually, I had this once with someone who decided that they're giving me advice about something. So I said, let me explain to you why I chose to do it this way. And then you can tell me why you think I'm wrong. So I explain what it is. And tells me, no, it's not what you should do that. Okay, so I said, but you didn't hear what I said. He says, well, you didn't say it right. You should have said something else. He's telling me what I should say so that his response, so my words should fit his response. Do you ever hear anything like that? A response is supposed to be a response to my words, not my words have to fit your response that you already have prefabricated. And he didn't even get it because he just thought he had it all figured out. Now, for all I know, maybe I was wrong. It doesn't even matter. But he definitely was not going to persuade me with that attitude by telling me what I should say first, and then that it should fit his response. It's like if I would say it differently, then it's not about you. I told him you're giving me advice about me. Listen to what I have to say. And this happens very often, and I've been guilty of it as well. You hear somebody say something, you don't have patience or whatever it is, and you right away you cut them off and you tell them something, and then they say, well, that's not, and you wonder why you're saying that. Why are you giving them? You think you're so smart. So listening is a whole different art. Especially we have difficulty listening when it's something we don't want to hear. If it makes us uncomfortable. If it's something we have a different approach to. If it makes us do something, it shines a light on our own flaws. So then when someone's saying something to you, especially someone close, you're invested in not exactly listening to what they have to say. So if you have a smart person, you know how to play the mind games and you twist words and it becomes semantics and the whole, the game. Everybody knows these games. We all play them from time to time. So listening is far more than just hearing. Listening is actually able to listen without you in the way. So it's not about me, whether I like what you're saying or not. It's just listening, absorbing another human being. So you actually shut yourself off. In processing, you do the exact opposite. After the research, after you listen, then you bring all yourself in full force. Then absolutely, use your mind, use all your tools. And that's what we did. So when the Rebbe spoke on Shabbos, I would listen, absorb. A little understanding, but the more I understood, the worse it was. Because suddenly an idea stimulates another idea. And what's wrong with that? You think, right now I'm saying things, I'm sure they stimulate certain ideas in your mind. So what's wrong with going off in your own thoughts? Nothing wrong. But then it's going to be your thoughts, not mine. Which is also fine, but just know that. So, what would happen if I understood something really well? I'd say, oh wow, that answers a question I had yesterday, it fits into this picture, it's brilliant, whatever it is. And then by the time I got back to listening, I'd missed the whole point. And for all I know, I missed the punchline. So what happens is you get yourself in the way because you want to understand, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the temptation should be, you have to have the patience to allow that temptation not to be satisfied right now. Because I'll tell you something, today I do process. And what you process after you're absorbed will be far, far healthier and far more in depth than if you process before you absorbed. Because you say, it's like the research. Now that I've heard it all, I've listened to it all, and I've absorbed it, I committed to paper, now let me process, let me understand, let me analyze. And there are many ways I can demonstrate this. If we did it more like a workshop, I would actually give everybody here a book. Or suggest that you bring a book, your favorite book, the best book you can find. And my suggestion would be, take any page you like in this book. Preferably probably be a book that you haven't read yet, or you're not that familiar with. But it doesn't really matter regarding this exercise. And read as many times as you like a page. One page. First page, the fifth page, whatever page. You can read it again and again and again. Don't take any notes. Just read it. And you can read it as many times. Then close the book. And the objective here is write down what you read. And then open up the book and see how close what you wrote is to the original. That's the first lesson of being humbled. And you realize you won't even get 50%. And you'll probably even get some mistakes as well, because you're going to write down what you understood, not what you read. Sometimes they're aligned and sometimes they're not. And I can't tell you until you try the exercise. And I've done this with people, and they were shocked. I said 50%. A few times I did this type of exercise with some individuals. Maybe 20% of what was on the page were they able to write down. And I don't mean word for word. I don't mean exactly recreating, like my memory, exactly the paragraphs. Just the ideas without additions and without as much as you can from that page. What does it teach you? You suddenly realize that what you think is called listening, or what you think is called absorbing, is you've never really developed, because no one's ever trained you. Now what will happen then, if you do this a few times in the beginning, you're not going to like what you see. You're going to be pretty humiliated, actually, because you think, I think I got it. I read it 10 times. I thought I got it. But it'll help you start seeing what you're doing wrong. And you start realizing, let me read it again. And go back a second time now and read it then after you wrote down that first draft. Now go back to the page, and guaranteed you'll have double you can double the results the next time, because you've seen what you can do, and then you realize, I have to read it differently. You start realizing, let me just read it without any explanation. Let me just say, what does he really want to say? And then what happens is you're able to write down. Maybe it won't be 100%, but it'll get better and better. And then you look at how you process it afterwards. You'll understand the depth of it far, far greater by these processes. The reason we don't do this is, number one, we're not trained. No one ever told us we should do it. Number two, we don't have patience. We live in a world where everything is so quick. And number three, maybe the biggest reason of all, is the smarter you are, the worse it is. Because the smarter you are, the more confident you are that you're getting things. A good mind picks things up quickly. But a good mind doesn't necessarily mean you can review it quickly. You can retain it quickly. Getting something and repeating it is not the same thing. As a matter of fact, as I said, the smarter you are, the worse it works, because the smartness is in your processing, not in your absorbing. To be smart and absorbing, you need more humility than brains. You need more absorbing skills. Like I said, children, it's not because they're smarter, that's why they absorb. It's because they're emptier, that's why they absorb. And this was an ongoing effort. And trust me, it's difficult for an adult to listen for hours on a Shabbos or a Yom Tov and empty yourself from all your previous conceptions and ideas and just absorb what you're hearing. Is an ongoing effort that every second you have to continuously exert yourself to want to do that. Now, of course, a prerequisite to all of this is that you have to be interested in what the person has to say. Why would you listen to someone in such a way if you don't care about what they have to say? So obviously that's a critical component, which is why very often today people sometimes share something with me, and I'm daydreaming, and then they say, did you hear what I said? So you start fumfering or whatever you start saying, and they say, can you rephrase it or something like that, when you really didn't hear it in the first place. And then they say to you, you were able to remember 7 hours of the Rebbe's talk, so you can't remember 5 minutes of mine, type of thing. I get this. So I don't want to be the one that breaks it on them, that I don't hear any history unfolding what they have to say. So obviously, I don't have the same type of concentration. I'm not saying it's right, but the fact is you have to make choices. It's not like you turn it on. If I'm listening to someone and I don't find interest in what the person has to say, or I don't find it valuable, why would I suddenly suspend my entire processing and stuff like that? And but you need to give it a chance, because every person maybe say something very valuable. Don't get me wrong. I think every person has something valuable to say. The Mishnah says, hey, who's the wise person? The one that learns something from everyone. So in truth, we should be listening to everyone. But still, we do make choices, and we only have that many hours in the day. And just like you look online, you read a few articles on a subject, you right away say, okay, this article is not really relevant, or I don't like the take on this article. But if you really want to do something thorough, obviously you have to listen more, and even if you don't like what you're hearing and stuff like that. So, of course, a prerequisite, as I said, is that it's important for you to want to remember. So this is just a few, this is what I just suggested is just one. Another exercise which I would suggest is just like I said with a page, with someone you love or someone you care about. And an exercise would be, let them share something with you, a feeling, a thought. And may even be something that is disagreeable with you. Something that you may not necessarily agree, but it doesn't really matter. And the same thing, write down what they said. And then send it to them. Send them an email and say, I want to just write down what I heard from you. And tell me if it's accurate. And obviously, I'm not talking about if they told you, that it's going to rain tomorrow. I'm talking about something more personal or emotional, something which is more complex. And it's interesting to see, did you convey correctly what they said? And they'll tell you, you know what, you got it. Or they'll say, you missed the whole point, or you missed some points. These are exercises that, first of all, teach you the patience and humility necessary in this process of absorbing. And above all, it teaches you to respect. It teaches you to respect another person's ideas and thoughts. Which is, the truth is, the real art of writing is really the art of reading. You read well, you write well. You have people who have PhDs in literature and in writing. They're not necessarily the best writers in the world. You find some of the greatest writers didn't even finish school. So you may think it's just a gift from birth. It's not necessarily. It's people who listen well and absorb well. Some of the greatest writers were the people who absorbed experiences. They were observers of the human condition. And then they conveyed it well on paper. Because no writing comes just out of the blue. It comes from human experiences. And some say fiction is actually closer to nonfiction than nonfiction is. Because someone's writing about something that they experienced. It may not be the exact story, but it's based on our points of reference. Obviously there's abstract writing, there's even science fiction, there's all kinds of types of writing. But there's no such thing as writing that doesn't have something of the human spirit and the experience of the human spirit. The best writers, I would suggest, are not just wordsmiths. Obviously, it helps a person is a powerful, is a master of language. But it's not just language. It's experience. They convey the feeling. I'll never forget from the few things I did learn in high school. We all have our high school experiences. What that song goes, there's one of these pop songs about what we didn't learn in high school, what we did learn. Okay. I remember in my 11th grade English teacher, his name was Mr. Millendorf, and we made him crazy, of course, as teenagers. But there's a few things that did seep in over the year. And one thing I have, and I called him years later because he taught me the power of the adjective. Okay, I'll tell you what I mean. I remember he had one day we asked us all to describe something that is like a beautiful scene. So I chose a sunset and the waves washing up on a beach. Okay, and we describe it in a sentence or two. So whatever 11th graders, what were we, 15 years old, 15 years old. So we wrote a sentence. And I remember he took my page and he said to me, I wrote something like, the sun setting in the dusk or something. I don't remember exactly. And he said to me, instead of saying the sun, you say the red sun or the sinking sun. And instead of the evening, you speak the dark or pitch black evening or night. And instead of the sea, just to say the white foam rolling across the dry, arid what's called sand being absorbed. And I remember he just took the same word, instead of just saying the noun, he added an adjective to it. What kind of noun is it? You can say I ate dinner. You could say ate a tasty dinner, or I could ate a zesty dinner. If you ever hear people, especially wine reviewers, they talk about wine like it's a human being. A type of expression like the personality of the wine. You can literally feel like it's a human being that is embracing you. Embraces you, and with its tingling impact on every taste bud and so on and so forth. So expressions like this, really, when they resonate with us, is because the person who's expressing it, whether in speech or in writing, has in a way gotten into the soul of the experience. And when they say it, it resonates. You say, I get that. Or they describe a character. It may not be a character you've met, but they describe the character so intimately that it's as if you met that person. And these are the best writers. The ones that the character comes alive. And you relate to that character in a most, in personal way. So, I would submit that the ability to do that began with an absorbing tool, not a processing one. The ability to write that was because they observed well, or they watched well, or they studied something well. And you'll see this. Some of the best writers spend hours and years in the city or in the country where they were going to write about, and they just picked up the vibes. They may not even written it all, but they were there. Now, of course, writers can imagine things, but the imagination is also based on experiences and knowing how to convey those experiences. So when you think about memory this way, memory then is more than just remembering, the memory of a hard drive. That how much memory does it have? 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes, 3 terabytes. Terabyte is 1,000 gigabytes. A gigabyte is 1,000 megabytes. Megabyte is 1,000 kilobytes. Right? We're not talking about memory like that. People ask me often, so what happened? Like, at what point, for example, the Rebbe spoke for 5 hours. Did you take 1 hour, another person took another hour, another person a third hour? That question comes from the obvious thing is you have a hard drive, and at some point it runs out of memory, so you have another hard drive that will remember after that. But it doesn't work that way. If you can't remember 5 minutes, you can't remember 5 hours. And if you can't remember 5 hours, you can't remember 5 minutes. It takes, of course, concentration and mental exertion. But it's not about running out. It's about it's a qualitative shift that's required. It's not about it's not a physical type of memory where you're just retaining. Because we're not talking about a photographic memory. So there are people who can look at a phone book and then close it and they can tell you exactly what it said there. It's not at all what I'm talking about. That's something you can't train yourself to do. There's some people have that gift and some don't. Some say it's not even a gift. Some say it's usually a sign of an autistic savant or something like that. You see a box of toothpicks fall on the floor and they can tell you there are 1,020 toothpicks. So this is some type of otherworldly perception that isn't something you train yourself. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about actually the effort of a mind being able to absorb. And guaranteed all of you here, all of us, everyone, can listen and absorb far better than you think you can. I would say you're probably using 5% of your capacity to absorb. And even with a little effort, just being made aware, it can go up to 20%. And with more training, it can go up to even to much higher than that as well. Because again, this is not something that we're focused on. As a matter of fact, in many schooling systems, and especially debating methods and arguments and so on, we're trained to do the exact opposite, to aggressively argue a point, and not necessarily to listen to the adversary, to hear what the other person has to say. The Talmud says that Hillel and Shammai were two classic colleagues who disagreed. They actually only disagreed about 3 things, but their students disagreed about many things. So it's a classic argument in the Bible. It wasn't just a disagreement. This one said kosher, this one said non-kosher. So it wasn't this one said parif, this one said fleshik, this one said milchik, that type of thing. 2 opposites. And how could it be either one? You can't reconcile between those 2. And then the Talmud tells us that the determination was made after a while that the halacha, the ruling, is according to Hillel. And here's the interesting reason given. You'd think why? Because he had more brilliant exposition. He had better oratory skills. He was a greater scholar. He brought better proofs. No, none of that. It says because he was humbler. Because he would precede, when he would present the arguments, he would precede the words of Shammai before his own words. And that's why. So that's a great feature, humility, but why is that determination? Why is that the arbiter of determining a legal issue? A legal issue, you'd think the one who has better arguments, The one who expresses them better, the one who has better proofs, the one who has more, the consensus with him. I mean, they can give a whole list. It's brain power. It's about ideas. Humility is a beautiful, give him an award for his humility. And humility works in many other areas, but how does humility impact this discussion here? And what does that have to do with preceding Shammai's words before his own? And the answer is because humility allows us to trust the integrity of his conclusions. That when he preceded Shammai's words, what he was doing was, he was listening to others. And his conclusions came after a lot of listening. So even though Shammai clearly was a humble man, and Shammai was definitely a great scholar, but Hillel had more of a measure of being able to absorb. Shammai was more of an aggressive arguer, more gvura. When the potential convert comes to Shammai and says, teach me the entire Torah standing on one foot, Shammai says, it's impossible. He throws him out. Because it's like disrespectful. What do you think? You can learn wisdom, the entire Torah standing on one foot? What do you think this is? And he was right for doing that. He was teaching him a lesson. He didn't do it in a harsh way. He was telling him that's not, it's a non-starter. You're not going to study a whole body of literature standing on one foot. It doesn't work that way. There's no one sentence. And Hillel embraced him and said, don't do unto others that you don't want done to yourself. That's the entire Torah, and the rest is commentary. We all know this. But why is Hillel's approach better than Shammai? Shammai seemed to be more correct. Hillel also agreed with Shammai. Obviously, Hillel did not think that one line in the Torah and that's it and you go to sleep. But he saw a person who was sincere. He listened to him and his needs and realized, let me begin by telling him what the key line is. And if he's motivated by that, he's going to then go. V'idach perusha zil gemara. The rest is commentary, meaning go now study the rest, because it's all an extension of this love for another. Don't do unto others. So Shammai was telling him the way it is. Wisdom does not happen on one foot. And Hillel was talking to the person more. What's better for him? And better for him. So Shammai was correct, and that's why we need to know what Shammai said. Because that's the way. Academically, Shammai is correct. You don't learn things on one foot. But Hillel was the better listener. The better therapist. Let's put it this way. Shammai was perhaps the greater scholar. Well, they were both great scholars. But Hillel could be trusted more because he knew how to listen. And he could take Shammai's argument and say it first and do justice to it. He didn't just say Shammai's argument and dismiss it. He offered it, and then he would offer his afterwards. And not in a way to debate Shammai, just to show that he thought it through. So the person who thinks through all the angles, who would you trust more? The brilliant person who gives you an idea in the most powerful way? Or someone who shares with you and says, you know what? Here are the 5-6 different solutions people offered. I went through all of them, and I came up with a 6th solution. The last person you'll definitely trust more. You know why? Because he's more thorough. The first person may have given a great idea, but then you wonder, did he really go through all the other options? Did he really learn from them? The most crystallized conclusion of anything is when you really review all the different options, when you stretch an idea, which is why another so-called trick of the trade of real thorough thinking is when you have an idea. As passionate and excited and as convinced as you are of this idea, one of the healthiest things you can do is counterintuitive, yet again, is to challenge yourself and say, what happens if we didn't do this? Let's do the exact opposite of what I'm thinking. So just doing that, that itself is already an art, because you're stretching your mind. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean you won't come back to your original idea, but you have proven that you're able to challenge yourself, or get somebody else to challenge it. And that allows you not just to be smart and get good ideas, but also to absorb and to listen and to remember. And that memory therefore is much more, as I said, than just retrieving things. Memory is about the effort and the sensitivity of respecting an idea to the point that you're ready to disappear and allow the idea to speak to you before you speak to it. The idea should teach you and not you it. Like it says, one of the previous Rebbe said once that when you study Torah, let the Torah should teach you, not that you should teach it. In other words, let the wisdom let you be the student and the wisdom be the teacher. Which is why the greatest compliment you can give in Judaism to someone is Talmud Chacham. Talmud Chacham means a student of a wise person. If you say someone's a Chacham, which means a wise person, it usually is actually an insult. Chacham means, he thinks he's a wise guy. He thinks he's a smart guy. A Talmud Chacham means the student of a Chacham. It means even the greatest scholar always remains a student. He always remains an absorber always remain someone that can retain wisdom. Reishis Chachma Yiras Hashem. The beginning of all wisdom is the awe of God. When you open up a Talmud, you'll always see it starts on page 2, not page 1. Page 1 is blank, to teach you that before you enter wisdom, be blank. Be a blank page. Be an absorber. And the absorbing allows you to process in a much more profound way. So, in this context, the memory really is about who we are as human beings. They say a gentleman is someone who remembers a woman's birthday but not her age. And obviously the opposite of a gentleman is one who remembers the age and not the birthday. So there is memory is very much connected to sensitivity to others, to ideas, respecting wisdom, and not just trying to be smart. It's not about you and I. It's about allowing the idea to be the emerging truth. When I mentioned before Moses, whose birthday and Yortzeit is tonight, that's what Moses was. He gave his life for Torah. He completely sublimated himself to the Torah. It had nothing to do with him. And that's why he was trusted by God. And that's why we trusted him. They believed in God and Moses as servant, because Moses never took himself that seriously. He took the idea seriously. And that's why he was the humblest man that ever walked on earth. That's what the Torah calls him. At the same time, the greatest sage, the man of God, the man whose words the words of the Torah we repeat, we review, we discuss. Why would we be so dedicated? Man, there's a lot of great giants. You ever think anyone sits over Einstein's words the way they sit over Moses' words? And Einstein was clearly brilliant. And there's people who analyze it. But first of all, most of us never even read Einstein's papers. Secondly, is because it wasn't that. Einstein was teaching physics, a particular area, and the brilliance in that area. That Moses was not about himself. He was teaching something beyond himself. The greatest teacher of all is the one who does that. And he's doing that as a way of being a conduit. Now, I would argue that even Einstein or any great scholar is really being a channel. But to the extent of the humility that Moses had, that why the Bible is the greatest bestseller. Because it doesn't have an author who's on a book tour and getting promotional and stuff like that, because it is basically telling you it's higher truths, and no one is getting royalties for it, and no one's associated with it. Moses understood that. That's why his name is associated with it, because he did not have his name published on the cover, and definitely did not. His grandchildren are not getting royalties from our study of the Torah. So that is part of it, the humility involved. So to go back to Zachor, let me rephrase this whole thing, maybe reframe it in a different context. I mentioned before children. Here's how memory works now, based on this introduction. So I'm going to describe now the dynamics of how memory works. When something happens to you, or you read something, you have an experience. So what happens? So of course there's short-term memory, which is, it happened this moment, it happened right now. A minute later, you more or less can retrieve it. Or a second later. But what happens, whatever it is, the experience or the thing you've read or the idea, whatever it may be, think of it, it leaves a mark on your brain. It's almost like a copy machine, copy something. So the experience enters into your consciousness. Most experiences will fade very quickly, because your mind says, this thing is not that valuable or relevant to me, so I discard it. Like, for example, you came to the class here tonight. Unless something significant happened on your way here, you probably don't even remember things that happened in the street, that you may have passed by a person and just saw a face and even have nodded to them. Because your mind immediately says, this isn't that important or significant, and therefore don't give it too much attention. And don't waste too much of your brain energy, your mind energy on it, which is completely fine. I'm not suggesting otherwise. If we did that, we were absorbing everything that was going on, it would be impossible to function. We have to constantly make these type of choices. Now, of course, just as a qualification, I would say a sensitive person, a spiritual person, always is looking for opportunities, because sometimes you may meet somebody you think is an accident and it's important interaction. But at the same time, we have to make decisions. You can't stop when you're going somewhere. You can't say, I'm going to stop at every store, because who knows, maybe God's sending me somebody in that thing. If God wants to send you, He's going to make sure you're going to find out. You just don't want something like, if something blatant, someone comes over to you or something like that, you don't want to ignore something because you have something more important. But discretion is still necessary. Okay. So that's the superficial stuff. But then the more significant things, so you do register in your brain, and of course depending on how significant, if it's very significant, you're going to do something to maintain it. You may write it down, you may get contact information, you may follow up, you may read more about it. You'll do things that are going to try to enhance that experience. But still, after a while, that too may disappear. You may have gotten an email that was important a year ago. You responded to it. It was very important. You put it away you saved it. And then, a year later, you're suddenly going through your inbox and your mailbox, whatever, and you suddenly find it and say, hey, I forgot all about it. And if you had not found it, you may have forgotten completely. You may have not even finished the job. Maybe you didn't respond to the last exchange. This is a common part of our lives. And again, I'm not being critical, just part of the reality. And then there are those experiences that I referred to in the beginning of the class, which is the very powerful ones that never disappear. What is really happening when they don't disappear? They're leaving a mark inside your consciousness that is impossible to dislodge. That means it's like an etched mark, not somewhere in a closet in your brain, but in a very significant part, and it's very easy to retrieve, and in many ways can even, God forbid, if it's a negative one, can haunt you all the time. It remains with you. How long it remains, that's again dependent when it happened, how it happened. I'm not going to go through every experience. I'm just trying to suggest here is that our psyche, think of it as like a clean slate when we're born. Our conscious psyche. That clean slate, letters will become embedded in it as we grow. In the younger stages of our lives, that slate is like a warm piece of wax. As a warm piece of wax, every experience gets etched into it, and as the wax hardens, it remains there forever. If that you have an experience when you're 20, 30, 40, and the waxes are already not that soft and not that pliable, it's not going to leave that same type of mark because we have more defenses and so on. In our formative years, the younger the age, the more the experience will leave its mark. It's like if you make a scratch on a seed in the ground, when that seed grows into a tree, that little scratch is going to be a very big nash. It's going to be a big cut in the tree if it even grows. So minuscule and microscopic things that happen to us when we're young children can have tremendous impact later. Because at that stage, everything is so fragile and very gentle and very delicate, and every scar is etched into it, for good or for bad. So essentially, memory really is, conscious memory is what is happening is you are retrieving something that's etched inside of you. Some things are very deeply etched, so it's not difficult to retrieve. Most things are not etched that deeply. Or they may be there, but they're like locked away, we call it in the unconscious closet. So on your slate right now, inside of your psyche, there are millions of memories. Everything that happened to you in your life. Some of them you may never retrieve. Some things are very easy to retrieve. The ones that are, as I said, are etched very deeply and present even in your consciousness. And some with work you can retrieve. And there are things that you may want to lock away and not want to retrieve so quickly, as I mentioned. And there are things that you want to retrieve that you can't quite do that. So the question is, how do you open these doors? How do you open the door between your conscious mind and that unconscious state where all these things are hanging around? And opening the door, obviously, with discretion, what you want coming through is what you want coming. You don't want everything coming suddenly streaming into your consciousness. So that's the real question. So in Kabbalistic terminology, there's the thing called the koyach hamaskil. Think of that as like the well of water, the well springs, the root, the source of intelligence, the collective unconscious, if you want to call it that way. And then think of it, if it's a reservoir of water, which may be, let's say, 100 miles away, just using that as an analogy, that water is drawn through pipes, through mains, into the city. Those mains break off into arteries, like branches of a tree, those branches into smaller branches till they become pipes that enter into your house, to your home. Those pipes connect to your plumbing system, and the plumbing that comes all the way to a sink, or a bathtub, or a shower, or a washing machine. And your faucet is what controls, the valve controls the flow. If the faucet breaks, the water comes rushing in without any limits. If the faucet is broken, nothing will come through. So the reservoir of water is a large, infinite body of water, relatively speaking infinite, and the pipes are what allow it to come into your home. The analogy is this: the collective unconscious is a type of reservoir that you have no access to consciously. It's there. It's on some type of quantum level inside your brain. It's in your mind, but it's not something you can access. It's called the unconscious. That in turn has branches or arteries that break off into branches that slowly enter your consciousness. Consciousness is essentially a limited flow, drop by drop, like a faucet, like a valve that's allowing in ideas to come into your mind. Memory travels through that faucet as well. When you close your eyes and try to concentrate or remember something, what you're doing is going through the faucet into the pipes, as deep as you can go, and you're trying to draw out something from within there. So the question is, how do you access that inner psyche, so-called, the inner dimension? So I'm going to suggest here 5 tips, 5 methods of how you access it. And it's actually exercise, things that you have to do. You're not going to exercise. It's not going to happen automatically. You're not going to just suddenly take a pill or read a tip. It actually means you have to do something to allow that to flow in. Now, what I'm going to say, these 5 things, I've already said them in this discussion. I just didn't spell them out. But they are active tools that we use that allow yourself to go into that type of place. But before I get to that, I want to just add one thing. What I refer to right now is actually taken from a Talmudic text, very fascinating one, which one day I hope to maybe study here more in depth, because it's really fascinating psychology, Torah psychology. So the Torah says the following. It says like this. I don't want to succumb to getting reading glasses, but I think I need them because I can't read. We may need a reader here. What's so funny? I've been getting AARP already in the mail for a few years, and I'm in denial, so I don't even want to. Anyone else in the same boat? You know what I mean? I mean, they're after you. They know everybody. I mean, it's no big thing. All you need is the birth date, I guess. I started getting whatever when I was already 48 or something. They start before you're 50, So I'm still not a member, but I hear that nobody holds out more than 10 years. So all you young people, you'll know about this one day. This is part of the aging process, the saging process, as some say. So here's what it says here. Okay, another counterintuitive thing. The farther I put it, the easier I can read it. Sometimes it's good to keep your distance. That's the lesson. If you want to really appreciate it, don't get too close. For comfort. So the Talmud says like this. Okay. And all this, of course, is being captured for posterity. I would like to look at this when I'm be 120 years old and say, "You thought you were old then." Okay, so the Talmud's speaking about a child in its mother's womb. And I just want to refer to just a very fascinating text here. It says like this. So Rab Samloi, Darash Rab Samloi, he's one of the sages. What is a fetus compared to? A child in its mother's womb. It's interesting. Lepinkis shemakupel umunach yadav al shtei tzadav. Sorry, lepinkis shemakupel, like a folded scroll. That's what it compared, like a folded scroll. Pinkus is a scroll, or you could say a notebook, but like a folded notebook. And what means folded? Because the fetal position is a folded position, and he continues to say, because when you look at a child, you see that his 2 hands are like they're all rolled into a ball. So it's like a folded notebook. That's the expression, which is interesting. Why do we call it a notebook, a scroll? I mean, why is that? What? You think of a folded scroll as like a Megillah on Purim, when it's folded. It's rolled up. So it's true. It looks like a rolled up scroll. That's what a child is, rolled up into himself. But why a scroll? There's so many examples of something that's rolled up. I mean, why a scroll? We'll talk about that in a moment. And then he continues. I just want to refer to a few references. I'll base this. Okay. Then he continues with, and his head, of course, is between his legs. His mouth is closed, and his navel is open. And he eats from what his mother eats, and drinks from what his mother drinks. And does not expel any what's the word for it? Any waste, because it would kill his mother if he did that. So it's all absorbed into the system. Now, mind you, this is a text from over 2,000 years ago that withstood the test of time in its observation. Now, then he continues and says, and then when this child enters into this world, the avera elam, what comes out of the womb and enters into this world, meaning is born, niftach hasasim, that which is closed gets open, which is his mouth, that was closed throughout the pregnancy, that gets open, and that which was closed that which was v'nistam hapasuach, that which was open gets closed. The navel closes up. So it's interesting. So that which is closed gets open, and that which is open gets closed. That's the expression here. And because if this didn't happen, he would not be able to live for even 1 hour. Then it continues. While he's in his mother's womb, there's a flame that burns above him, over his head, and he's able to see all of existence. Then he says, and there's no better years, no better days in a person's life than the ones when you're inside your mother's womb. Just to add that. And then continues and says, one more thing that I wanted to mention, and you're taught the entire Torah inside that womb. And as soon as you leave, when you're about to give birth, you're told, an angel comes and says, shh, which is why we have a cleft over our lip, over our upper lip, and makes you forget the entire Torah that you learned. Then it continues saying that you're also given an oath that you'll be a good person and not an evil person, and so on. I'm going to stop here. So you can see it's a pretty fascinating text, because obviously he's talking about each one of us. And nobody here was not in their mother's womb, just in case you're wondering. Even though you may not remember it, and neither do I, but that's the reality. So what I wanted to refer to in the text, in which I think is really vital, the reason it's a scroll is precisely what I said earlier. Because all your life experiences are basically like writing your book. Zev Sefer Toldos Adam, there's an expression that this book is the life of a human being. The life of a human being is a book, and every chapter of your life, every detail of your life, even though you may not know what's coming, is inscribing in your psyche words and sentences and stories. So your life is a story. It's an unfolding story. And in your mother's womb, you are a folded up scroll. Folded up because it's not yet, nothing's been written. Which is, like I mentioned before, a child, therefore, absorbs everything. It's like a dry sponge. The scroll is completely clean when you're born. But it's not completely clean. That's why the other part of it. The interesting thing is that he says that you're taught the entire Torah in your mother's womb. That means your psyche, your consciousness, was taught something. You have wisdom inside of you. But then you're made to forget. What's made to forget? It means that it goes into the unconscious, and the conscious mind is not able to access it. And the rest of your life, all information, everything you learn, is about trying to retrieve something you always really knew. Which is why wisdom resonates. Like you say a song. It's like I heard that somewhere before. The greatest compliment you can say about something is, I've learned that, I always knew it, but I didn't know how to put it in those words. What's happening is your conscious experience of acquiring a certain piece of information is resonating with something that is there in your unconscious. As I said, think of the reservoir, and now your conscious mind is retrieving it. which also explains the expression where that which is closed opens and that which is open closed, which is like a cryptic statement. But if you think about it, what it's really saying is that a part of you closes up when you're born and another part opens up. And the part that opens is your conscious. Now your mouth is open. You do a lot of speaking, but you also have to be doing some listening. So 9 months in your mother's womb, there's no speaking. Your mouth is closed, and you're busy just absorbing, and someone else is feeding you. And the way everything is being streamed into your consciousness, you don't have choice at that point. But as soon as you're born, everything changes. Now you begin to make decisions. Now obviously not a newborn, but the process begins. Now your mouth is open, and now the question is, can you also learn to listen? Listening really means that you're shutting down your outer tools and allowing the inner subconscious to speak to you. That's what real listening is. And listening to another person is the same thing. It's not letting your ego and not letting your personality, not letting even your mind power to get in the way. It's shutting things down and letting that inner wisdom to emerge. The concealed unconscious wisdom, which is the secret really of what memory is about. So memory, if you really want to put it in these terms, is really the ability to access the inner you and express it to the outer you. Where most of our day in life is consumed with the outer experiences, the superficial sensory things that our senses interact with, what we see, what we hear, taste, touch, and smell. The truth is there's a whole inner life that began long before you remember. But it's all there. And the question is, how much can you retrieve it and access it? So with that being said, let's talk about the tools, the 5 tools. So I'm looking for these acronyms. I have the acronym for this one is helper, without the second E. I couldn't figure one that's perfect. We'll work on it. Helper. So it's HELPR. So maybe the R is also a separate category. It's a help R. Okay. So always remember. Whenever you think, how do I remember? Remember help. Cry out help, and you'll begin to realize. So what's help? The acronym is for these 5 words. Help is humility. Empty yourself. That's E. L is listen. P is patience. And R is review. Okay? These are 5 tools, actual exercises and tips and tools that I have personally can vouch for, I have used and proven to work. But it takes effort. All of them have effort. They all have obviously a certain common denominator. And basically the commonality between them all is they're counterintuitive. And they're the opposite of what you would think you would want to do to be able to listen and to remember and to retain. Because as I said before, a good mind wants to process. A good mind wants to comprehend and understand, and impatiently wants to do so. But that's the processing. The listening part is the far harder one. And imagine what our lives would be like if we really knew how to listen. We all, I'm sure, made mistakes in our lives. Would everybody agree with that? Anybody not made any mistake yet? Okay. We made mistakes in our lives. And also probably possible that you may have met somebody while you're making these mistakes who gave you wise advice that you didn't listen to. Now, the question is whether you know it or not. It depends where you are in your life. Sometimes you know it, and you say, I wish I would have listened. Sometimes you still don't know it. Sometimes you still don't even know that you should have listened, and you still think that you're on the right track. That's even worse stuff. So there's all stages in life. The question is where we are. Okay. So, now what means you didn't listen? You went to somebody for advice. Something wasn't working, or you needed some problem. You had some problem, and you obviously went to this person, so you respect the person. So why didn't you listen? The reasons usually, the usual suspects, not because you thought you're smarter, is because you underestimated how your status quo and your situation was more powerful than you thought it was. You may have heard the right wisdom from this person, but emotionally, you may not have been ready yet to make a move. And then you minimized and said, okay, really, you forget that advice. Because you go back to your status quo of where you're at, and you're stuck. So even though somebody can give you wise counsel, but they can't change your situation. To do wise counsel is not just to listen, you have to act on it. And most of us will gravitate back to our general condition because we go to work, we have other things that control our schedules, and it's not so easy to just change your patterns, even though you may have gotten good advice. So we didn't listen. And not even maliciously, it's just that we underestimate the power of your status quo. Your situation is more powerful than you think it is. And therefore, as wise as someone will give you advice, you just after a little while, back to where you started. Which means you haven't really worked on yourself to truly listen. Because if you truly listen, to work yourself means saying, you know what, I heard a person tell me something. I went to them. So either I disagree, which is your right, and if I don't disagree, why am I not listening to this? And it's your job, it behooves you to figure out what is blocking you from listening. It may be the right thing, it may be what will save your life. And, this can be in issues of, let's say, relationships, shidduchim, finding the right one. It could be issues of your own personal lives, dealing with family, parents, psychological stuff. I mean, the list goes on. Obviously, I'm talking about things that are more emotional and more complex than just, simple advice like, where to go buy a loaf of bread. So we're talking about something significant, or else you wouldn't have those resistance. So it's really about understanding and being humble, which is the first thing. Humility. Real humility is necessary here. It's not some sideshow. It's not like humility is a nice quality because it helps you out in life. No, humility, like with Hillel, is actually a direct root of how we listen, of how we absorb, of how we change things. And if you don't have that, it really almost nothing will enter, because what happens is either your own intelligence or you think you're smarter and stuff like that. Now, humility should not be should not be confused with weakness or lack of confidence. Like many people think humility is okay. I'm weak and I don't have any strength of my own, so I'll be humble till someone else will tell me what to do. That's not humility. That's a crutch. That's an addiction. Actually, that's weakness. In Judaism, in Torah, there's a thing called a anav, and there's a thing called a shafel. Anav means a humble person. Moses was the humblest of them all. Anav is the word used. Shafel means a person of low self-esteem. What's the difference between a person of low self-esteem and a humble person? Obviously, it's a difference between night and day. A humble person, humility is coming out of strength, out of choice. The person knows he has qualities, knows he has virtues, knows he can be brilliant, and still says to himself, these are God-given gifts. If someone else were given these gifts, they would have done better than I did. They don't think they're self-made person. That's humility. Low self-esteem is actually a form of arrogance. It's saying, you know what? I'm worthless. I have no value. It's distorting the virtues you may have. It's basically saying God blessed you with all these virtues, and you determine that you're worthless. Who are you to say you're worthless? So arrogance can take on two shapes. It can be, inverted arrogance. Exverted arrogance, is there such a word? Extroverted, I don't know. Expressive arrogance would be, a pompous person who's just boasting and just behaves in this type of arrogant way. But there's another form of arrogance. We'll call it an inverted arrogance, where you like yourself in the basement. You say, "I'm nobody. I'm worthless." Look who thinks he's nobody. You know that joke, right? Who are you to say you're nobody? You were created by God. He put you here. He gave you virtues, qualities. Everybody has something indispensable to contribute. So low self-esteem is a weakness. Low self-esteem is distortion. Low self-esteem is actually saying, I know better than anyone. Okay? Did I say something that just knocked you off your chair? So the humility comes from strength. Humility is the wise person who's sitting in a room and everyone's arguing about something and he has plenty to say, but out of strength he chooses to be silent. Whatever reason. They're silent. Either that people can't hear it, or people are, let them. Low self-esteem is someone who's silent, not because he's made a choice, it's because he doesn't think he's worth saying anything. He doesn't think he has anything valuable to say. It's a very different. One is demoralizing, and the other one is empowering. So we talk about humility, we're talking about the strength, the confidence, the security. A lot of insecure people take on the shape of being very not humble because they're really insecure. It's like they say he hides his ignorance with his arrogance. A wise person doesn't need to do that because they're not ignorant. So the first step is humility. Humility on a very basic level is what I said earlier. Respecting the sacred space of another person. Someone's talking to you that you care about, listen to them and make sure that you heard what they said and repeat it to them. And even if it's something you didn't like to hear, and ask them, is this what you said? and get it right. That's humility. And that type of humility is actually a great quality. It's the humility of the page I said. Read the page, close it, and then write it. And if you didn't write it right, go back and do it again. And don't say the page has to be rewritten because it didn't fit what you rewrote. Because it's supposed to be the other way around, obviously. And the joke they used to make was that two people studying the Talmud and they find a complication. So one person struggles and struggles until he finds how to answer it. The other one says there must be a printing mistake. So in other words, he's right, but the words may be wrong. So there's an expression, imreiku mikemhu. The answers are there. The Torah has all the answers. If it's empty, if you come up with empty, it means you're empty, not necessarily the wisdom is lacking. That would be a little arrogant to say that. And that requires a humility that Hillel had and so on. So that's the H for help, the R. The second is empty yourself. They tell the story about a guy comes to a sage or a mystic or a guru or whatever. The custom is when you come to him, the first thing you do, you have to bring him a cup of water. So this potential student comes to this master and brings him a cup of water. And, he thinks that it's showing a certain type of respect, serving your master. Bring him a cup of water. The master takes the cup, turns it over, spills out the water, and gives him back the cup. So he thinks, okay, the lesson is, I have to be broken. I have to be shown. You think you're a big guy, you're bringing me water. You're not such a big guy. No, that's not the lesson. The master tells him, when you're like this cup, then you come back to me. You came full. I want you to come empty. You want to absorb information, you have to empty yourself. This takes strength and takes effort and takes confidence. And remember, insecurity does not contribute to emptying yourself because you feel terrified. If I'm going to empty myself, I will have nothing left. The wisest of people are the ones who know how to empty their minds. Now let me explain what empty means. This doesn't mean empty it and you're not going to ever have it again. It means suspending for the period now that you're listening or you're learning something. You want to learn. I teach different classes, and I teach sometimes people who are pretty scholarly. And we learn a text, and people right away, we read a few lines, and there's already argument, and so on. And 99% of the arguments are about people's understanding of the text based on things they know from before. And I have to always, I'm talking to people who are really scholarly, they're not trained to think that maybe, why don't we just finish reading what the author of this text is saying, and then we could argue. No. Because it becomes so second nature, and you almost think it's like part of the healthy intellectual process. An interesting thing, it is part of the intellectual process. The timing is off, however. The first step is you have to know what's being said. I guarantee you, if you argue about the point before you really retained and understood what the author meant to say, your argument is usually going to be not about this text. Now, people are trained and have actually read it, then let's read it, let's understand. Then you could argue. And whenever I say this, people don't have even the patience. Which gets me to the fourth thing. We'll get to that. So empty really means you're approaching a situation, and this is anything, a person, a conversation, a book, experience. Let empty yourself. It's what we do almost naturally when we're standing in front of a natural wonder. Or Niagara Falls, awesome sight. There we don't need to be reminded, because the experience itself just shows you, wow, it's beyond me. So for that moment, that's what awe is that you're emptying yourself and you're letting the experience. Imagine you see a sunset that's beautiful and you say, oh, wait, you know what? This reminds me of my science class and the sun is this. What are you talking about? Why don't you just be quiet and be like a little child and absorb the enchantment of the moment, the magic of the moment. There's a beauty to that. That doesn't mean you don't appreciate it. And you can analyze it. That's not the point now. We're not analyzing. We're trying to empty ourselves so we can let the experience be in control. Someone who can't do that, can't let go, will not be able to dance, will not be able to sing, will not be able to free themselves. So then what you're going to have is you are still there, and the experience is going to be a little extension of you. So I saw a sunset. Instead of the sunset, maybe you saw me, type of idea. Number 3 is L, is listen. Okay, this goes without saying. This has been the theme of the entire discussion. If you have the humility, and you have the emptying yourself, you'll be able to listen. And listening is not hearing. Listening is, H is for humility, not for hearing. L is for listening. Listening is, as I said, the ability to absorb something that's beyond you or outside of you. Love also begins with an L, interestingly. Okay. Well, love also has two forms. You could have love, I'm loving, it's all about me, what I love. Or it can be, love is not about you, it's about another person that you're loving. And allowing that person to merge, or you're absorbed by that experience instead of controlling it. Going back to the themes I've been discussing, we live in a world of control, acquisition, acquire things. We live in the moment, not as a process. So the third, the L, is for listening. And you can test your listening abilities pretty easily based on the exercises I suggested. You may have heard tonight, for example, some things that interest you, that you'd love to repeat to somebody. If you're thinking already while I'm speaking out to repeat it to somebody, it means already you're not listening because you're busy doing what you want to do with it. But tomorrow's going to come and you're going to try to, let's say, repeat some things you heard here. Or anything. Guaranteed that you'll not have the words for it. And not because you didn't hear it or listen to it, it's because you're hearing me speak now. You're hearing and understanding me understand myself. Because there's another this deceptive thing, which is the ears travel faster than the brain. You can hear things that you have not yet really earned and owned. That's how the brain works. You could hear something, and later say to myself, okay, I'm going to repeat it, and then say it to somebody, I just heard something great. And they say, okay, go ahead. And then you start looking, looking for words. This happens to all of us. What happened? What happened was that you were carried on the wings of the person who said it, but it's not yours yet. That's why you take notes. You go over and hear it again. You listen again, and slowly, with work, with effort. And you can't do this. You can't be lazy. This leads me to the next thing: patience. You have to be patient, and then slowly you'll be able to repeat the whole thing because you'll have owned it. And then it won't even be repeating. You'll actually become so integrated, absorbed by you, that it will become like part of you. And then you'll be able to share it as if it's your own idea. So that takes, however, a few steps, as I said. The first thing is to really listen well. To know, don't overestimate your intelligence and think you got it already. Sit down, write it, review it, focus, try to repeat it to yourself even. Say, here there are 5 points I heard. And obviously things like little tips like help out, because they are essentially letters, and this is not my own idea. The Talmud, Maimonides uses this all the time for memory. Basically, sometimes you sum it up and say it was 5 ideas, 10 points, 5 subcategories, the type of structure that our minds create. But it's the patience of allowing the process to emerge, and that consists of absorbing, and brings me to the fifth thing: review. When you open that book and read it many times and then write and see it's not really, you're writing only a part of what you read, really means you haven't reviewed it properly. Obviously, review is a subset of listening, but review means to go over it again and again. I remember my first my first entry into real scholarly study. And I was in my late teens, I was working on something, and at that stage, you're so excited about learning. At least I was. For the first time I was really learning something. So I remember, honestly, I literally, there's certain texts that till this day I'll never forget them, because I read them maybe 100 times. And interestingly, as I got a little older and so-called more knowledgeable, I didn't have the same patience to review a text that many times. And I actually envy those days when I was more so-called naive and just absorbing more. And I realized the problem, because the more knowledgeable, you don't have the patience, like the ABCs that I mentioned before. I don't have the patience to go back, because you already know things. And at times now, when certain texts that I work on and I try to write, I have to go back to that place. I have to write. A few years ago, I wrote a summary of a very profound Hasidic text called Samach Vov. It's on the website and so on. I can tell you, I had to go back to my so-called youth, and I studied some of those discourses maybe 20 times, again and again and again, because I was unable to write it down in a way that I thought was doing justice and to the integrity of what was said, not what I understood, what was said. And I'm doing a similar thing. We're starting a new project called I Am Beis. It's another It's a centennial of maybe the most profound of all mystical discourses ever delivered. Very, very, maybe the best kept secret. You'll hear more about it as we. I'm already giving classes in English. You could see it on YouTube. We even have a channel called Ayin Beis. So if you look up Ayinbeis, Google, you'll find it. So I'm starting to write now summaries, and I haven't even gotten there yet. I'm still not comfortable to write it down. It's not like I haven't ever studied it. It's not like I haven't written. I'm just telling you, I'm at a place where I have now to have a lot of humility and a lot of emptiness, listening, patience, and reviewing before I'm ready to really start writing. Just again, using myself as an example. So, obviously, you could say to yourself, who has time for all this? 5 steps like this. I'm busy and so on. That's fine. That's up to you whether you're going to establish time. Maybe that's the 6th tip. Make time. But that's already a question of priority. But if you do want to become a better listener, if you do want to become a better retriever of your own unconscious, a person that's able to connect to yourself, to a deeper part of yourself, and to a deeper part of other people, I don't think there's another way except these 5 steps. So again, they are help and helper. Okay? So we have humility, empty yourself, listening, patience, and reviewing. The Talmud and reviewing. To say one final thing with reviewing, since again it's Moshe Rabbeinu's birthday and yahrzeit, for 1,500 years, all our parents and grandparents did exactly what I just said. So we also have a little history on our side. Good genes we have, good genes. And those genes are because, you see, when Moses taught the Torah after Sinai, the only thing that was actually put down, documented, were the 10 Commandments. They were engraved in stone. The rest, there are 2 opinions whether they were written immediately or at the end of the 40 years. Moses wrote them in Torah scrolls as the Torah describes. But those were Torah scrolls. But what was taught? How was teaching happening? What were Jews doing when they were sitting in a class? Remember, there were no tape recorders. There were no pen and paper. There were definitely no laptops and iPhones, even though the joke goes like this, the joke when in France they dug 5,000 feet under the ground and they found some type of certain type of coils. So they said, you see, we had telephones here back in the Stone Age. In another country, in Turkey, they dug 10,000 feet and they found copper. They say we had telephone and we had communications here 10,000 years. And in Israel, they dug 10,000 feet, 20,000 feet, they found nothing. So the Jews said, you see, from the beginning of time, we always had wireless. So the fact is, in the time of Moses, what did they do? So Maimonides writes that they took notes. Now, on what did they write? There wasn't what to write on. The only thing you really had then, papyrus comes from the reeds. I don't know if they had papyrus, which has to be processed. Even hide, which is, what's it called? Not scrolls. When a scribe writes on a parchment. Parchment is a whole processing, leather and tanning the leather, etc., etc. So what did they write on? So some say there was using stone and writing different notes, but they couldn't write at length. The ability to write at length was only possible once you had ink and parchment. And they definitely didn't have that. So they basically jotted down very brief notes. Most of it was retained right here. That's why it's called Torah Shebal Peh, the Oral Torah. Bal Peh, it was memorized. It was all memorized. And this went on for 1,500 years. For 1,500 years. So remember what we said, the child is born in the mother's womb, it's like a folded scroll, a folded notebook. And for 1,500 years, in the times after the destruction of the Second Temple, that period of time, that's when Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi and the other sages saw the importance that it's starting to being forgotten. Jews were now already starting to leave Israel because they were being expelled by the Romans. And they realized the time has come to document all this that was taught orally for almost, as I said, 1,500 years. Passed on generation to generation. Surely things were forgotten. The Talmud talks about different laws that were forgotten after this stage and that stage. And then they wrote down what we have today is called the Talmud, which consists of Mishnah and Gemara. And ever since then, the Jewish literature has grown, the scholarship has grown in an unbroken chain. But it's all based on what those teachers had heard from their teachers, who heard from their teachers, all the way back to Moses. So the idea of this oral tradition that I'm describing was done. This is what they did. And you see, without machines, they had no choice but to be humble and empty themselves, listen, patient, and review again and again until they were able to retain. They had no option. Just like we had no option when we were listening on Shabbos and holidays, there was nothing to rely on but your mind. And the mind is no tricks. You can put a tape recorder, it just records it, and that's it. So this was an effort done for 1,500 years, and it's embedded in our genes. So we have the power. And guaranteed, when you become a better listener, you become a better communicator, you become a better lover, you become a better commitment, you're better at relationships, because you're really engaging with someone on a much deeper level. First, as I said, listening is listening to yourself, to your own inner voice in a deeper way. And automatically that helps you listen to someone else's inner voice. What are they really saying? And you can see two people listening to someone crying, a child. And a good listener will hear one thing, and a not good listener will not hear. They'll hear the superficial layers. A good listener hears what's behind the scenes. Will pick up something that we don't usually pick up, And you'll ask them, how did you really get that? It's not just because they're smarter. It's because they stripped themselves of their own self. And they were able to be more sensitive to the deeper levels that are speaking to us. So it's also being better parent, better educator. I mean, every way possible, this allows you to become a better human being, a greater human being. Because it opens up doors to places that you have not accessed yet. So try it out. You got the 5 tips, the 5 methods, and let's see what happens. And we can compare notes after Purim. So with that said, this is the Parsha Zachor, the power of memory, the Shabbos of memory. It's a good time to begin. And you could try it out with some friends. And you may be surprised to find out some of the results about listening. I remember Dr. Ruth Westheimer. Remember her? So she had this radio show that was really like off limits, obviously, for people under 18. But that means everyone under 18 was listening, obviously, as soon as you... So I used this once. I was once speaking to a group of young people, because I don't know, maybe I read it. I don't think I heard that show. But she said, so what's the sexiest organ on the human being? So of course it elicits immediately laughter. Everybody laughs. Everybody's got their little jokes about it. And then she says, okay, after everyone weighs in their ideas, she says, it's the ears. The ears. And people say, oh right, the ears can be pretty sexy, And then she says, no, not because of the physical ear. It's the power to listen. That's the sexiest thing, is the ability to listen. So, interesting, she went to Beis Rivka in France. So maybe she learned that in Chassidus. So I once saw her by dinner by Arthur Schneier, by Parky Synagogue, and I asked her about it. So she said she heard it from her mother, she heard it from religious Jews, basically, the power to listen. So it's interesting how that also plays itself out. Now, with all the talk radio that's going on, and everybody's a pundit, and everybody has a lot to say, and we maybe think we're listening a lot. We're hearing a lot of sounds, that's for sure, because everybody is broadcasting themselves. But that doesn't mean you're listening. As a matter of fact, the more sounds you hear, probably the less you listen, because there's so much. It's like so much turbulence. It's time to shut down some stuff and allow some new voices to emerge. So maybe God bless you all to be better listeners than you ever thought you could be, but it'll take a little work. Shabbat Zachor, power to remember, the power to retrieve, and hopefully this will help us all prepare for a more joyous Purim, as well as a month later. With Jews, it's always one thing linked to the next. Mismach Gula L'Gula. You don't have one Gula, you already have another Gula coming, right? Passover. A redeeming time, and we'll definitely be talking about these themes. So I want to just say that next week we will not have a Lakas on location because it's Purim night. And there'll be a Megillah reading here if anybody wants. It'll be here, and of course other places as well. But I will be pre-recording a class So we'll be online. I didn't do it yet, but we'll be online this time 8:15, and then of course afterwards archived. So I will not see you next Wednesday night, at least physically. If we do see each other, it means maybe we said a little l'chaim. But the plan is not. But 2 weeks from now we will resume here. Philip has his class tomorrow night, and I see he announced that it's already the beginning of his 26th year. Velvel is reminding me that we are about to reach our big milestone of 1,000th recorded class. Right? You said 965, so we're closing in 1,000 actually recorded classes. It's more without the recordings. It's probably 2,000 because I didn't start recording till around 1991, 92. So it's around 10 years that I didn't record it in classes, which will forever only be in the memory of those that heard it, and the rest is on tape. So with that being said, I want to wish everybody a very happy Purim. If everybody needs any assistance Purim, like I said, there will be a Megillah reading here. And any other way that we can help, we're always there for you, hopefully. And please, we feel reciprocate. And please leave us your email address if you have not yet. Again, I dedicate the class in honor of Moshe Rabbeinu, our great teacher, who without him we would not be here. And have a very pleasant evening and a very joyous week. Thank you.